I have quite a story to relate to you today. The story of Purim. Please join me as we pass through the thick curtain of time and travel back almost 2,500 years, back to ancient Iran to meet our Jewish ancestors and their enemies. We have arrived in Shushan, which in Persian is pronounced Shh, and is the capital of the vast Persian Empire. The king is Ahasuerus, a former stable attendant of the previous Babylonian monarchs and who had stolen the throne from them. His wife Vashti was a princess and a former enemy. Mordecai is Jewish and is a descendant of King Saul. Esther is descended from the same royal family and is a cousin of Mordecai. When her parents passed on, he took care of her. Haman is the main advisor of the king. Being at one time in extreme want, he had sold himself as a slave to Mordecai for a period. He was an astrologer and had been a barber for 22 years. We have arrived in the middle of a massive party celebrating the anniversary of the king's ascent to the throne. It's been going on for 180 days. It's very noisy as we pass through the large room. The heat combined with the pungent odors make us gag. We look for the supposedly beautiful Vashti, but we don't see her. Suddenly, all faces turn towards the king, who has screamed in a slurred command. He orders Vashti to come before them wearing nothing but her crown. The guards return with Vashti's answer, "Thou art the son of my father's stableman." She has refused to come. The Talmud tells us that she had grown a tail and had a rash all over her body. Maybe that was the reason. The king is very wroth, and anger burns in him after this insult. We see Haman talking to the king and overhear him recommend that she be eliminated. He tells the king it would set a bad example to other women. The king thanks him for his counsel. We learn that Vashti was to be removed and executed immediately. "Vashti, where is my coffee? Vashti!" shouts the king as he wakes up the next morning with a hangover. "Where is Vashti?" Slowly, he recalls the events of the previous evening. The king needs a new queen. His advisors suggest that his soldiers go to every corner of his empire and bring back women for him to consider. We skip ahead a few months and find that Esther is one of the women taken. We overhear Mordecai advising her not to reveal that she is Jewish and descended from royal lineage. We again skip forward in time. It's now Esther's turn to be presented to the king. She goes as plain and unattractive as she can, hoping that he will reject her. But the king finds her very comely and makes her his queen. She refuses to tell him her history. One day we overhear the king, "Esther, the former king of Babylon has a brilliant Jewish advisor whom he could count on for good advice. I would also like to have a Jewish fellow to advise me." She immediately recommends Mordecai. The king agrees and Mordecai is given the job. A bit later, Mordecai happens to overhear two Persians conspiring to poison the king. He sends word to Esther, who reports the plot to the king. He has them executed and directs that it be written in the official record book. Mordecai's contribution is mentioned, but evil Haman has his name removed and his own inserted in its place, assuming that the king would not remember anyway. We tend to agree, as we have seen, that the king has an issue with the grape. The king is not thrilled with Haman. He's really happy. His role in deposing Vashti has helped him. He has elevated Haman to the second highest position in the empire and orders everyone bow to him as he passes by. All comply except Mordecai, who refuses. Haman feels that Mordecai has set a very bad example for the rest of the people, especially since he is Jewish. Haman determines that he will have to deal with it and decides that just to make sure, he will have all the Jews eliminated. His difficult decision at this time is not the elimination of the Jews, but rather, when is the best time to do it? We watch this foul man thinking it over. He needs a lucky day. For this decision, he decides to draw lots. In Hebrew, a lot is called pur, and the plural of this word is Purim, hence the name of the holiday. The date he chooses is the 13th day of the 12th month, Adar. Its zodiac sign is Pisces, and we hear him mumbling, "Now I shall be able to swallow them as a fish which swallows one another." He goes to ask the king. The king is no fan of the Jews and agrees, giving Haman his royal ring. Haman gets him drunk and keeps him so while these royal edicts are drafted and dispatched. He is afraid that the king will change his mind. Mordecai hears of his scheme and knows that he has to get the news to Esther. We overhear him telling her that the time has come for her to reveal her identity to the king. She says that she will. The king agrees to see her and wants to know what was bothering her so much. We hear him tell her, "What is your request, dear Esther? Up until half my kingdom, I will gladly grant your wish." His whiny voice and ways irritate us. "If it is good in the eyes of the king, I request that His Highness come with Haman to my party tonight," she says. The king is nervous and sends messengers to get Haman. Watching Esther spending her time at the party, praising Haman, gets us angry and also does not thrill the king. But we notice that Haman leaves very happy. At the end of the party and more drinking, Esther has still not divulged her secret. After more royal prodding, she says, "Tomorrow, please come to my second party, and then I will fulfill the king's wish." The king stumbles out. We follow him. On leaving the party, Haman sees Mordecai, who ignores him, making Haman even angrier. He goes home to his wife Zeresh to tell her about the Mordecai incident. As we stand there, we hear her suggest that he build 100-foot-high gallows in his front yard. She tells him, get the king's permission to use it on Mordecai. We want to bop Haman on his silly-looking hat as we see him ponder that. We watch him immediately setting to work, building the gallows, using the wood of the thorn tree, and see him working far into the night. Meanwhile, at the palace, where we have left part of our group, the king can't sleep. He orders his personal copy of the official record book to be brought and read to him. This was not the one altered by Haman. He is worried that perhaps Esther and Haman have a secret relationship. Maybe they're plotting against him. Maybe he has overlooked rewarding someone who has done him some service. Our mouths fall open as we see the book supernaturally opening itself to the assassination plot thwarted by Mordecai. The pages keep turning back to that incident, and the king is getting restless. Finally, the pages themselves actually read out loud the story of Mordecai saving the king's life. He had forgotten that. He asks what was done to reward Mordecai. The attendant tells him that nothing was done. Suddenly, a knock at the door. It's Haman. The king orders him brought in, but is nervous that he might have come to eliminate him, it being the middle of the night. Haman, though, has other thoughts on his mind, as he wants permission for the hanging. We see that the king has trouble focusing. Before Haman can speak, the king asks him, "There is someone deserving of my special honor. Can you suggest a fitting manner to do so?" Haman, thinking that he is the considered one, suggests that the person should be dressed in the king's finest robes with a crown on his head and led through the streets on the king's horse. Someone in the front should be walking and proclaiming his specialness. The king likes the idea and tells him to do it for Mordecai, who has saved his life. Haman is not happy with the outcome and leaves. The dark expression on his face frightens some in our group. We return early the next morning to watch Haman carrying out the task. He leads Mordecai on the horse, all the while proclaiming in a loud voice what he has been told to say. "Behold, this is what is done when to the person whom the king wishes to honor." As they pass his house from the roof, we look up to see his daughter watching the procession. After a night of a very distressed stomach, his daughter was taking her full chamber pot for emptying. She takes the opportunity to reward who she thought was Mordecai, leading her father on the horse, and empties its foul contents on his head. While wiping it from his face and his eyes, Haman looks up. Just as his daughter looks down, both recognize each other. His daughter screams in anguish, "Ay, ay, 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 ay!" We cannot contain our laughter, and we're sure glad that we did not get any of it on our clothing. Shortly after arriving home, very unhappy, and before even getting the chance to clean up, Haman is called to Esther's second party and goes, smelly and covered. Meanwhile, the king is very distressed, again offering her half his kingdom, which she again declines. After more drinking, Esther at last tells him the story, concluding by saying, "I am a Jew. I beg of the king to spare my life and that of my people." The king demands, "Who is this evil person that would do such a thing?" a wicked foe, Esther says as her finger actually points at the king. But an angel turns it in the direction of Haman. This evil Haman, he cares nothing for you. He is consumed with hatred of the Jews and taking revenge upon us. Holy cow, Haman is quaking in fear. How to get out of this? The king gets up, leaving them alone in the room to cool down and to attempt to control his anger. Haman tries to convince Esther to intercede on his behalf. Esther lies down on her bed, overcome with stress. Haman is right there, bending over her, barely standing, begging and crying. Suddenly the king walks back in and sees them and begins to loudly curse Haman. The servants, hearing the commotion, rush into the room. They see how angry the king is, and perhaps to distract him, tell the king about the gallows that Haman has built for Mordecai. They point it out from her window. The king, barely able to stand up due to his anger and the drink, roars, "Hang him upon it!" We return the next morning and watch Haman, his face bowed, led in heavy dark shackles to meet his maker. We strain to hear his last words, but we can't. I guess that we can imagine what he is thinking as he stands there, looking out on what was and what could have been. The king decides to give all of Haman's property to Esther. She tells him that Mordecai is her uncle. The king elevates Mordecai to prime minister and gives him the signet ring that had been removed from Haman's finger. We choose to depart now, after Haman's demise, to return to our own religious home here and are at peace. Our temple welcomes us back after our arduous journey. The rest of what took place after we left involves Mordecai's very difficult task of reversing Haman's edict and its order to remove the Jews. There were a number of battles fought, and on the 15th of Adar, they celebrated their victory. I leave you now with the words of Esther and Mordecai, the faint echoes which have followed us back through time, wishing us a happy Purim. They ask that we remain strong with our shields ready as we again face our modern-day Haman, who stands on those same banks of the Persian Gulf and again threatens our people with his own spears and arrows. Haman's name has changed, but the place and the goals have not. Thank you very much, and happy Purim.